big book up here? Oh, I may not need it. It's okay, Polly. My name is Mildred, and thank you. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Toronto. My dry date is May the 18th, 1973. I'm a member of the Rocks Glen Traditional Group. We meet on Mondays and Thursdays. If you're ever in Toronto, I sure hope you'll call me. I'd love to take you to my group or show you my city. And I had a sponsor who died 2 days before Christmas. He was sober 58 years at the time and had been my sponsor for 41 years. I now have a new sponsor. Her name is Polly P. When you're 43 years sober, having a sponsor is a little different than it is when you're new. And I haven't been as regular in calling as I should. Because at 43, you know how to figure things out, right? Don't take that to the bank. I just said to Polly, we'll have to sit down and figure a time so I can be accountable and phone you once a week. That's what I really am committed to. I had something strange happen to me today. If you've seen me before, often I bring to the podium a thin red book, and you've seen it. Well, it's gone, it's in the wind. When I got my suitcase today, just as I was leaving home, I stuck it in the front flap, you know, that has a zipper around it. And when I picked up my suitcase, the zipper was open and no big book. So that was published in they took the first 164 pages plus the appendices, and they made gift copies, and I used to carry that because I have other of that type, but this one, the pages are ripped out, and it's got lots of tape on and lots of stuff written into it. Hi, Carla. And all kinds of stuff. And so it's in the wind, so I hope somebody benefits from it. I had a few notes in it because I feel really intimidated, in a sense, by talking about this subject, which has become such an important piece of my life. It has become my life, and that is coming to believe. Because over the years, the way I believed when I was a little girl, the way I believed when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and the way I believe now, and the way my life is as a result of that, it's completely different. You know, I read once St. Francis of Assisi said, use words only when necessary. So maybe we should just have an hour meditation. Just sit in the silence wouldn't be a bad idea, and you might get more than if I talk, but I'm going to talk. Isn't it wonderful that we come together? And I'd like to thank you so much, Polly, and the committee for putting this together. It's wonderful. And for your courtesies to me and the welcome that you've given me. And being here with all of you, you know, walking in, and so many of you, you're my heart sisters, and it's just wonderful to be here with you. And then Jane, you know, when you were talking, I was thinking, I'm not usually jealous, but I'm jealous of your life. I'm jealous of the fun you had as a drinker. And for What a nasty girl you were. My story is about as different as day is from night, from your story, and from the transformation that you've had. I too have been transformed. I'm not the person I was. I'm not the person I was a year ago. Imagine I'm quiet inside. I'm peaceful inside. And at last I can tell you, I do believe that God is everything. I do believe that that is the answer. You know, I guess almost a year ago, the person who is my spiritual director, he gave a talk. And in that talk, he said something that just clarified so much of life. You know, Bob Bazanz and I often talk about things, and we both agree. We live life forward, but we understand it backward. And, you know, what I'm referring to in this talk is, he said, we all live in two worlds. We all live in the world of the body, the third dimension. And at the same time, we live in the world of the spirit, the fourth dimension. But I said to myself, that's what I've been looking for. That explains me perfectly. I was trying to get the third dimension working right. I was trying to use the third dimension to make me happy, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And in the transformation process, in coming to really get this idea, and I can't make that happen, but I believe that that's really what the program is about. Bill said, you know, we'll lose our fear of that word, the mystical, and we'll realize that every AA's transformation is really about the mystical coming into our lives and changing us. You know, it says in the book, doesn't it? And I used to pass this by. It says we've been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. Well, pass that one by. Who needs that? And then later on in step 10, it says, we have now entered the world of the spirit. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy Hillary's singing. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy Amanda's jokes. And that doesn't mean that we can't get together and really have fun and sing and dance and whatever else, to whatever degree we're able to do that. But it's a different thing when you're trying to suck your happiness out of the third dimension. And that's what I was doing most of my life. I'm not doing that today. And a level of joy and peacefulness has entered my life that I never knew possible. There was a man on the planet 2,000 years ago, and he spoke about the peace that the world cannot give. And he talked about being in the world but not of it. How did I get to that place? You know, I'll tell you one little story before I get to what happened to me. I was at the airport, no big surprise, one day a couple of years ago, and I was facing the window out to the tarmac, and there were airplanes out there, and against the window was silhouetted a man who had a little boy in his arm. The little fellow would have been maybe 2.5, 3, and the father was he wanted him to look because they were loading stuff into the planes. And he wanted the little boy to look. And the little boy didn't want to. He wanted to see what was going on in the room. And the father kept, and I heard him say, he kept taking his little cheek and push and saying, son, look there, look there. And he'd look back here and he'd say, look there, look, that's interesting, look there. And I think that God has been doing that all my life. He's been pointing and saying, Mildred, look there. And I couldn't see it. Why couldn't I see it? Well, let me tell you, I was born on a farm in Saskatchewan. I just had a young woman come up and give me a present because she too was born in Saskatchewan. And anyway, on a farm, big family of 10, we were Roman Catholic. All those things are significant. And by the age of 3, I was crying. I was the baby of the family. I don't, like Jane said, she didn't have any trauma. I didn't either. I was loved. I was petted. I was whatever. And but I was a lot younger. The other 9 they had a different life than I did. Now, I don't know if that's where I started to feel isolated, but by 3, I was crying. I had a sister who was, in those days, retarded, they said. She was injured at birth and couldn't learn as fast as the other kids. They kept her in grade 3 till she was 16. The kids made fun of her. Her name was Dorothy, and the kids called her Dumb Dora. And she knew she was different and didn't know how to function. She couldn't do some of the things that my brothers and sisters could do. And in those days, I'm 83. Aren't I a good-looking 83? And just thought I'd mention it in case you passed it by. Don't miss an opportunity. That's a long time ago. And the educational system, you know, and for starters, didn't know what to do with her. And my family, we never talked about it. Never once do I remember any, and so I made my own conclusions. I gave them their instruction because Dora used to go and crawl into bed with me. I don't care who you are. You're going to look for comfort, aren't you, Hillary? Just like you sang. And you're going to look for comfort. And she'd crawl into bed with me and she'd say, Mildred, why was I ever born? Why didn't I die in the cradle? And I'd cry with her. And I'd say, why was I ever born? That's one piece. I don't need to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry. This is my journey. This is how I got to chase God. And the other piece was my mother. I don't know why my mother and I had such a difficult relationship. My mother was the finest woman in the community. Everybody loved her but me. It really was an awful situation when a child pushes mother away. And now I know my mother must have had as much trouble with me. I don't know, do we have past lives and that we meet people who we haven't finished stuff with? I'm telling you, the stuff with my mother goes deep. It went deep, and it affected everything. You know, yesterday as I was sitting in the airport, I sat next to a mother and a grandmother who had a 5-month-old baby, and they were cuddling him and so on. And, you know, right from the get-go, I pushed my mother away. And that's how I grew up, isolated, because, another reason, I gave my brothers and sisters their marching orders. They were supposed to make Dora stop crying, and they didn't. And I totally misunderstood it. Nobody explained to me that they couldn't. I thought they didn't fix it because they wouldn't. And so what did I take on? I took on a set of beliefs that sometimes still come up. A set of beliefs that said, I'm not important, nobody listens to me, nobody helps me, life is scary. You've got your own things. I know we've all got them. I didn't understand that at the time, but that's how I grew up. So I went to God. We were Roman Catholic. We went to church. I don't know if the priest said it or if he didn't, but I heard him say that God is love and God is power, and I thought, God's going to fix this. Good for you if you think that. You know, I went to God and I gave God his marching orders. I'm glad you're laughing. And as far as this is the interesting thing to me. I never turned against God. I just thought God was kind of a useless twit. And you put God on the shelf. And sometime more will be revealed, and that's true. That's true. That's exactly how it's been. But in the meantime, my life evolved. I'm smart. And so I finished grade school when I was 11. I finished high school when I was 14. I never fit. I don't fit. I didn't fit in this little country school I went to. I didn't fit in my parents sent me to a convent boarding school, which was a finishing school, really. I didn't fit there either, because the girls, I was a lot younger than they were. I finished school at 14. But by this time, I should go back. When I was 5, I took a drink. By the time I was 5, I felt about as rotten about the world as it's possible to feel. I was angry. I was filled with fear. Like, I'd go to bed at night and I'd think, why can't Doris stop crying? Why doesn't somebody fix this? And then at 5, I took a drink and I fixed. Alcohol wasn't my problem. It was my solution. And because it was such a perfect solution, it became a problem. But it isn't the problem today. It was me looking for comfort. And I could explain my whole drinking career by saying, no, not just my drinking career, my first 20 years in AA, by looking on the outside for something that was going to fix what was really wrong on the inside. You know, I really think we shortchange ourselves when we talk about the disease. Where does the disease exist? It exists in me. Bill didn't call it a disease, he called it a spiritual malady. I'm not right. I'm looking for third dimension stuff to make me happy. See, and I think that we go through stages. I was thinking when you were talking, Jane, you had a ball in the third dimension, didn't you? I bet you weren't sitting on the wood pile like I was, looking at the sunset and looking at the stars and saying, God, if you can make that stuff, why don't you fix me? Why don't you make my world okay? And so, I was an alcoholic from the get-go. You know, you drink different when you're 5 than when you're 50. No, but the effect of it is no different. I used to say, the bad world went away. No, it didn't. The world is the same today as it was in 1973. What happened was my perception of it changed. That's what alcohol did to me. It shut down the voices. And instead of the way I felt and looked at the world, all of a sudden, I can dance, I can sing, I can do all kinds of things. And that pretty much tells you what my drinking career was like. At 14, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to university. In those days, there was no place for me to go. So I got a little job, and I found a choir that I liked, and I hung out with a bunch of kids, and a lot of them were boys, and they were probably 18. I was 14 and 15, and I was about as wild as can be. And I had a great time for about 3 years, but inside there was always this nagging that I've got to be drinking alcohol to feel that. And then that person came out, and I liked that person. And then one day, one of the crowd said she was going to become a nun. And everybody made a big fuss. And I thought, that's good. So about a week later, I announced I was going to become a nun. And they all laughed at me. The sisters at the convent school that I was at, they outright refused. They said, you don't belong here. The sisters in my hometown, they laughed. They said, you don't belong in a convent. Our priest said, you don't. He doubled over with laughter. He said, you don't belong in a convent. And the more they said, you don't, the more I said, I do and I will, and I did. And I knew where the swinging convents were, so I wrote to the United States. I knew that if there was a way you could be a nun and do what I was doing, it would be in the United States. And did I wind up here? No. Somebody finally sent me a letter and said, we have a community in Hamilton, Ontario. I had been born in Saskatchewan, which was about 2,500 miles west, if you don't know our geography. And so, sight unseen, they took me in. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic. I was so drunk I could hardly walk the night they accepted me. You know, today they would take one sniff of me and put me right back to go home. And in those days, they didn't do that. 1950, 1951, 1952, the world was still different. We didn't have all the uprisings and the leavings of the church and Vatican II and all that stuff. And so they took me, and Mother Superior said, yeah, you've got some troubles, but she said, we'll break you and we'll build you up. You know, today I'd run like hell I'd run. But in those days, I felt like a nothing. I felt somebody's got to fix this. And there was an element of truth because, you know, I'm a God seeker. You know what Carl Jung said? He said he always knew that every alcoholic was seeking the spirit with a capital S in every bottle of spirits. He also said something else that I read within the last 5 years. He talked about the secret gnawing, Gnawing, at the roots of our soul. I've heard a lot of people talk about the hole in their soul. I don't believe there's a hole in our soul. If page 55 is right, and God is the essence and lives deep within us, there's no hole. But I think what happens is we're born, and at that time, I don't know that it's any different now for many people. I was taught about getting right on the outside. Get lots of money, get a good education, get a big house, da-da-da-da-da. You know that theory. And it doesn't solve the gnawing at the soul. You know, if you go back in history, you find Isaiah saying, man, wake up, get up and put on your beautiful garments. What did St. Augustine say in the 4th century? After he had been the rake and the worry of his mother's life, he said, God, thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. That's me. That's me. And you decide how much of that applies to you and the way your life has gone. I stayed in the convent for 15 years. See, the convent was a total change of identity. I gave up my name. I became Sister Mary Eugenia. I gave up my lifestyle. I had to take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Had to fiddle around with those as necessary. And we gave up the secular clothes. And instead, you know, these days people take vows. I know a couple of people that I admire tremendously. They're not differentiated by the clothes they wear. They take their vows privately to God, and they live that life because that's what they've chosen to do. See, I had an agenda as I look. If I do this hard thing for God, then God's going to fix me. I was there 15 years, and I have no bitterness against what I really loved was the music. I became an organist, among other things. And, you know, rock and roll just doesn't do it for me. Sorry. It's not what I'm accustomed to. I love the pipe organ. I love to get on the seat and boom out those beautiful sounds. I love the Palestrina and some of the great classical music. I loved the opportunity I had to study. I got a really good education. And I loved the fact, I loved the silence. There was something about that. Mind you, we did 6 hours of spiritual activity every day. It certainly helped that half the time I was drunk out of my mind doing it. Anyway, after 15 years, Mother Superior called me and she said, she was new at the job. And she said, I don't think you belong here. She said, I'd like to keep you because you're so competent. But she said, I really think you should, if you want to leave, I'll support that. So we wrote to Rome. I got my dispensation and I stood on the convent steps 1966 thinking, see, what had all that done for me? See, I understand now. I had shut out the world. I couldn't cope with you. That relationship, that coldness with my mother kind of identified the way I saw the world. You had to stay at a distance. I didn't know how to let you in. And so I remember standing on the convent steps. I've got my name. I'm Mildred Kaltoff again. I'm absolved from the vows. I've got secular clothes on, and off I go. And I found the bars, and at the bars I found the men. And I have to say, I was relatively innocent when all that started. And I went to the bars, to the nice places, and in 10 months I was going to dives that smelled of urine and stench and God knows what, because nobody wanted me anymore, because my descent into hell was fast and furious. And I'm an ex-nun. The men loved it. Water. And I wasn't hesitant to let them know. Because it gave me status. And at the end of that time, I'm not okay. I can tell you all about, performing on the outside, drunk or sober, but I wasn't okay inside. I'm ashamed of who I am, so I signed myself into the insane asylum. By this time, I'd been locked up 32 times in psych wards. I'd had 38 electroshock treatments, and I tell you, if you need a shock in your life, that'll do it. And I'd been tied to the bed, and it wasn't for fun and frolic, believe me. They used to put me in cold water baths, and I had hundreds of hours of therapy. You would think, wouldn't you, that something would register? I was in worse trouble at the end of that, to the point where I'm in the insane asylum. My brother found me. Tom Ivester said something to me which I want to make reference to. Many years ago, he said, Mildred, what time did I start? Because this could go on and on. Got to keep an eye. How am I doing, John?
Good.
Okay. Holler when I'm not. My brother, Tom said to me one time, he said, I had a plan for my life. He's an American, as you know. And he said, I had a plan for my life. And he said, my plans went up in smoke. And he said, but there has been a power of good that has directed me to a life that I couldn't have dreamed of. And he said, I think you maybe need to remember that as you go about what's happening to you. And so, if you're sitting out there and saying, what's this got to do with coming to believe? It's got everything to do. Because as I look back, I can see the hand of, I'll call it the hand of God, call it the hand of good if you don't like G-O-D, because I don't know who G-O-D is either, so that makes two of us. And he's, you know, my brother came and he said, do you want to go to Regina or do you want to go to Saskatoon? I don't know. Oh, I said, I'll take Saskatoon, because he was taking me back to the West. They were horrified that I was in this insane asylum. And so he took me back. Why was that? There were two men waiting for me. One was the man I was to marry, a psychiatrist. I mean, after all, if you can get sex and therapy all at the same time, that's not a bad deal. And I could say it was cheaper, but in the long run, much more expensive. Because it cost me my soul. And that's a serious business. The other man was Dr. Hoffer. If you know our history, you know Dr. Hoffer was associated with Bill Wilson, and he was on staff at the University Hospital, and he took my doctor aside and he said, that girl doesn't have, because by 32 hospitalizations, you've got a pretty thick file. Everybody had a go at diagnosing me. He said, she doesn't have that. She's alcoholic, should go to AA. See, Dr. Hoffer knew Bill Wilson, knew about AA. Now, when my doctor finally said, no, he said it would interfere with her progress. Dr. Hoffer had enough clout. And finally, my doctor said, okay, you're going to AA. And I was excited, because some years earlier, my dad had called me. My brother, they always said, was going to die. And my dad called me and he said, some miracle has happened. He said, there's a new organization in Saskatchewan. He said, they call it Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what it is. But he said, your brother isn't going to die. He's been transformed. Huh? And he works. Not a bad go. And I knew, and then my dad cried. He said, it's so good. That's all I knew. My brother was sober 49 years when he died. So he paved the way for me coming in. Anyway, I went to AA. I'm going to get transformed. Woohoo! I take my seat in the front row and wait. What are a bunch of alcoholics going to teach Miss Mildred, well-educated, theologically impressed? What are you going to teach me? I see that now. Nothing was going to get past that. But I'm sitting there. If you transform me, then that's what happens here, and then everything's good. I didn't know I had to do something. So 3 weeks go by, and I'm sitting there with untreated alcoholism. I got nothing to make me feel good. And so I help myself to pills, whatever, and I sat in AA stoned for 5.5 years. If you're new, I wouldn't recommend that. I was in Prince Albert. Cease Corrigal was there. Wesley Parrish used to come from Florida. Willard Pegg used to come from the Carolinas. Chuck Chamberlain sat many an hour with me, and he'd say, Mildred, you have only one problem. You think you're separate from God. It's taken me a lot of years to really see the significance of what that diagnosis meant, because in the healing of that and in beginning to see how God has intervened, how God has, I don't think there's a God who says, well, you know, I think today Mildred needs this lesson. I don't think that's how it is. I think God is everywhere. God is here. God is always present. Our book says it. The day will come when faced by a self-imposed crisis, either you will get that God is or you will choose. No, it doesn't say, it says choose. It's your deal. Choose nothing or choose everything. I was 18 years sober when I did that. Anyway, I wound up on a park bench. I married the psychiatrist. For about 2 years, we had a glorious existence. We had money, houses, we had everything. And then he was alcoholic, he started to drink. And you know, if you want to know how fast you can lose a lifestyle, I can tell you how fast. And I wound up on a park bench. And I was on that park bench like a dirty tramp. And I can tell you stories about that, but I won't, because you can understand that yourself. And the May the 18th, 1973, oh no, I did that in AA for 5.5 years. And then I left AA with a snotty attitude. I don't need you. You haven't fixed me anyway. And you're doing it right, I'm not. And I left. And I thought I was not going to drink. Within 24 hours, I not only needed booze, I jumped out of a 2-story window, broke both feet because somebody had locked me into a room. Imagine that. Anyway. That was the start of a 1.5 years of convulsions, DTs, blackouts, blankouts, whatever, degradation you want. I wound up on the park bench. And the police took me on the morning of May the 18th, 1973, and I woke up in a psych ward, which didn't frighten me and didn't surprise me. And I couldn't really walk until Sunday morning, the 20th, and the nurse took me to the washroom, and I saw myself, and it wasn't a pretty sight. Took me to breakfast, and after breakfast, she took me back. And when we'd been in that washroom, I looked at myself, and I said to her, I've become a woman of the streets, haven't I? And she said, yes, you have. What are you going to do about it? And so when I came back after breakfast, I thought, what am I going to do about it? Every time I say this, something happens in here. Because at that time I was homeless. Imagine being homeless. Haven't got a place where you could go. My mother said, you can't come home when you behave like that. I understand your parents, you know. And I was penniless. And there wasn't a person at that time who would have taken a phone call from me. You wear out your welcome. People would say, do not come near us. You come near us, we'll call the police and have you arrested. So I thought, what can I do? I took my inventory. What am I going to do? The book puts it this way. It says we have to concede to our innermost selves. See, I'm the great conceder. I'll comply with you if I can get you off my back. I will concede the world to you if it'll get you off my back, but never in here. That morning, I conceded to my innermost self. Not that I was alcoholic. I'd known that for years. But what I conceded to my innermost self was, I do not know how to do life. I've tried it all. I've tried religion. I've tried education. I've tried men. I've tried the convent, and on and on and on. None of it has worked. You know how to do it. I don't. And that was the end for me. I'm going to take my life. And I asked the nurse to get my clothes. And while she went to get my clothes, as I stood there, I had a spirit. I don't know what else to call it. See, I didn't pray that morning, but I said the most profound prayer. I don't think God has a personality. It says she didn't say it right. I did say it right. If God is what I think God is, God has no difficulty with guiding me, directing me. God has a difficulty with my raised fists that say it's got to go my way, and if it doesn't go my way, it's no good. That's the way I used to pray. You know, there was the teacher who was here 2,000 years ago. He said, you pray, but you pray amiss. That morning I did not pray amiss. I just said, I'm done. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live. I'm going to take my life. Okay. I'm standing there, and in a heartbeat, I knew that I was clean. The thing I want to stress about that is, I've thought a lot about that in kind of preparing for this. If you had come into the room at that moment and said to me, "What's that about?" would I have said that was God's grace? Hell no. The way I thought, I just didn't think. I just did. See, I think if you can get to that point that you once can see that there's a power of good, and then go with the moment, and let the moment carry you, let the moment strip you if that's what has to happen. Let the moment teach you, love you, care for you. That's what I think happened that morning. No, that's what happened. I still hear my voice saying, "I don't know who and what you are, but I don't know how to live sober," because that's what jumped into my awareness. I don't have to drink anymore. I knew it. I'm clean inside. The compulsion and the obsession was gone. Why doesn't it happen to people like Dr. Bob, who struggled with the desire to drink? I don't know. I just know that for me, that's how it happened. And I said, "I don't know how to live sober. You'll have to send me somebody." And I swear to you, there was a rap on the door, and a man stood there. You go figure that. And he really was there, I think. Because he came back he said to me, "You're alcoholic, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, you want to make something of it?" And he said, "No." And he offered to take me to a hospital treatment center. Those of you who are younger, you have no idea. In 1974 or 73, there were no treatment centers. There was no talk about recovery. It was still very much a deep, dark secret. I remember my brother talking about going into the back alleys to get into a room to go to a meeting. It was, anyway. I went to that treatment center, and when I came out, I was still homeless. And they gave me enough money so I could get a room, and I got a room on Skid Row, and that's where I lived for the first year of my sobriety. I think back to that year, and that year too was the presence of God. I didn't pray. I didn't go to AA. The psychiatrist at Donwood, not my husband, the other guy, he was my angel. He was my God. He was my strength. He said, "You come see me once a week." Why did he do that? See, sometimes I think the gifts of God are given, and we mistake them. And so often I hear, "Well, God comes through people." Yes, God comes through people, but the good, the essence of good, is from one greater than any one of us. And that's really what service is about. Service isn't about being selfish and "I'm going to do for you so I feel good." Service is rather about the Spirit of God that wants to do something, and which you described so beautifully at the end of your talk. And so he said to me, "You need to get a job." Well, that's obvious. And so I pounded on doors for a day and a half, and I got a job sweeping a factory floor. And that didn't give me enough money to always have food. I know what it is like to be hungry and cold. And I still remember that first winter I didn't have boots. And I got through that. And I didn't have a nice warm coat. And maybe that's why I shivered during the first meeting, just thinking about that. But anyway, I got through that, and at the end of that, about 6 months into that, I was in the institution. A man said to me, "Do you want to come to a meeting with me?" I didn't know. I sure was not thinking about AA. It's funny about, times in your life. If you start to see God is in everything that's going on. There's teaching going on. This life isn't about getting money and getting famous and getting this and getting that and always feeling good. I don't always feel good. I feel lousy some days. And I've got to take a look at what's going on in here, not what's going on out there. What is wrong inside here? Because for so many years, I looked out there trying to get you to make me happy and didn't realize that the problem was in here. Anyway, that first year, I don't know how to put words to it. I had no hope. I was so far down, I just didn't have hope. All I knew was he kept saying to me, just keep on, and I did. So I got to this AA meeting. I don't remember what went on there, but I fell in love with you. This time it was different, and I saw something good here, and I stayed. My first sponsor got drunk, and there were two men at the meeting who took me aside almost immediately and said, Mildred, you are too sick to stay here if you don't do the steps. I said, I don't know how. I couldn't even read. Like I couldn't take a book and read two lines and know what I had read. They said, we'll read to you and we'll tell you what to do, and that's how I did the steps. You know, I think the steps aren't about mechanical perfection, that I understand the significance of every word. They're a heart process. They're a process of getting to God. And the getting to God starts with the I have no power of my own. You know, I think we miss that. Of course we have power, but it's not mine. Our book says it. There is one who has all power. That one is God. And so they took me through the steps, and I saw something. I saw that you weren't my problem. I had problems totally different from that. And then came the change. Then came the God shots. 1 year sober, I got a teaching job, and I'll go through that quickly. When you've been starving on Skid Row and you get a teaching job, and we in Canada get paid very well, like my feet didn't touch the floor for a while. I got into the school. Now I've got to be real, and I don't know how to deal with adolescence. Not the way I am. I used to know how to do it, but I don't know because I'm quite crazy. I don't know how to relate to 100 normal people, so to speak. I don't think anybody's normal, but I mean, they weren't alcoholics. And they didn't want to hear my sad stories about what was wrong. And I got another sponsor. And I'll tell you, if you've got a sponsor who will stand you up to the truth, thank God, because he didn't care if I liked what he said or not. And he said, I will help you to understand. And this is what this man who just died did. He taught me principles and how to apply the principles to my life and how to do that. And I haven't got time, but he was God's messenger to me, and I changed. And at the end of 7 years, another God shot. A teacher one day said to me, you know, you should buy a house. I said, I haven't got any money. My sponsor made me pay my debts. And I remember one time me saying to him, I don't want to give them my money. He said, dummy, they don't want your money, they want the money you took from them, with interest. Anyway, the first 20 years, because I really want to talk about the last, so I better get to it. The first 20 years, I think, I didn't have a prayer practice. I didn't have a relationship with God. I was a good member of AA. You know, I wonder how many people could say yes to what I'm saying, Because you sit at a meeting doesn't mean you got a good relationship with God. You can sit with, like I did. I was doing the stuff. I had a sponsor. And that's why God can work through that. I don't think that for most of us, spiritual experience doesn't mean that you're changed totally. That experience I had on May the 20th, 1973, that didn't change the way I saw the world. That didn't change my relationship with God. All it did was take from me that's what spiritual experience is about. It does that for which there is an opening. So, I bought my first house, and I was to buy many houses. See, fear is a great thing. And it's also a great thing to be able to listen and follow. I was afraid to buy my first house. Once I had the first one under my belt, I was off to the races. And I bought many houses, and I built my own house, and I had a great, great life. Lots of men, lots of whatever going. Yeah. But I'm sitting in the parking lot on a curb one day, bawling my eyes out because I'm not okay inside. Don't care how big your bank account is. If you are the God seeker that I am, you're going to be pushed to keep on moving. And you can't stop because you've got X number of zeros in your bank account and because you've got the big house. Yeah, it was good. I grew up through that in the third dimension, but I wasn't growing in the fourth dimension. And somebody took me through the steps and I started to fall apart. And I began at that point to see something was wrong inside. And at 21 years, I retired. And I went into a depression, and my sponsor said, you're going to get up at the regular time, and he gave me a routine, and I did it, and that went on for saved my life, about 6 weeks, and one day the phone rang, and it was Father O'Brien, a Jesuit from Toronto, and he said, I'd like you to come and give a retreat. And I said, Father, I can't do that. I said, I don't know how, I've never done that. And I said, you have no idea how many times I've been excommunicated. And he said, I don't care. He said, I hear you are a great teacher. And he said, I also hear that you are a great member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went and gave the retreat. I didn't like women that much. I like you now. But at that time, I was still in the competitive mode and didn't like anybody much. I can admit that now. My heart was closed up. That's the gift to me. I can look at people today and be excited about them and like them, not because I just didn't used to be able to do that. And the day I gave the retreat, and the last morning, Sunday morning, I had another God shot. I'm standing there in front of 80 women, and I start to bawl. I didn't cry pretty like they do in the movies. I bawled. And I said, words, I hadn't planned this. I said, I am the loneliest person in the world. I don't have one friend. I've got many acquaintances. People used to say to me, you intimidate me. I thought it was a compliment. You see, when I really believe this is what led me to chase God, because there's a thread going through my life that says, I want the third dimension to make me happy, knowing that it wouldn't do it. And I chased it, and maybe this will do it. There was never enough. It was never good enough. There was always an emptiness, a feeling of not being okay and feeling alone. And those women They circled round me, and boy, was I uncomfortable. I had never been real in my life. And now it was as if the walls, that's the only way I can describe it. I felt as if a piece of me had crumbled, the walls had gone down. Now what? And one after the other, these women came up and said, come and have a cup of coffee. And that was a different way of relating to the world. That's when I really, a new world opened up for me. See, I don't cry in front of women. I know how to shed a strategic tear in front of a man. I'm an expert at that. I have a buddy down there. And that whole experience changed me. And then people started coming for some counseling. People started coming, asking me to do big book studies and so on, and then more and more retreats and that kind of thing. And I changed, bit by bit. I want to talk now about trying to develop a relationship with God. I know now I didn't have a relationship with God. You know, I had a young man at my house not too long ago. He said to me, Mildred, do you feel the presence of God all the time? And I said, I wish. I don't feel the presence of God all the time. And I got to thinking about it. He said, I never feel the presence of God. So, you know, sometimes God puts words into your mouth that are much smarter than anything you could think about. And I said to him, you're married, aren't you? And he said, yes. I said, let's talk about that. When you met her, what was that like? Well, we didn't know each other. We just knew each other's names, okay? Well, then, what did you do next? Well, we talked a little at the meeting, yeah. And then we went for coffee. And what did you do there? Well, she would tell me things and I would listen, and I would tell her things and she would listen, and we got to know each other, and then we got a greater degree of comfort with each other. And then we decided we were going to get married, and we got married, and now we have a child, and so on. I said to him, do you love her? He said, yes. I said, do you think of her all the time? He said, no. He's a vice president at a corporation. He said, I've got to do work. I said, do you communicate with her during the day? He said, yes, I do. He said, sometimes she calls me or she texts me, I text her. And I said, tell me something else. Does she influence the way you feel about life? Oh, yes, he said, absolutely. Even though he said, I don't think about her all the time. And then I said to him, tell me something else. I said, if a cute chickie comes into the office with a good pair of knockers, what are you going to do? Are you going to flirt with her? Are you going to kind of have a little thing going on the side? Oh, no, he said. I said, why not? Because he said, and he got it, he said, because I have a relationship with my wife. And you know, that to me is a perfect description of how God and I get along. God means something to me today. But in that process, because I learned, at one point, there are three things, I think, that the walls came down, and then I found this teacher. There have just been so many God shots, people who came into my life with as I look back, with the right information for the growth of my soul, my relationship with God at the time. It's phenomenal. I could write them one after the other after the other. The tape and the man who talked about the inner stuff, the old ideas we take on in childhood. I chased it. I came to the States and I found that man and I worked with him and he taught me about the stuff we've got buried and how it affects our lives until we do the healing work. And then Rick and I used to have a prayer meeting, and we'd decide what spiritual activity we were going to do. And I'd say, I'm going to practice the presence of God 10 times a day. And the end of the day would come, I might have done it once, maybe. And it was a mechanical thing. But you know, I kept at it because I knew I liked the work of Brother Lawrence. And he talks about the practice of the presence of God, doing the dishes in the kitchen and doing the pots and pans, but doing it for the glory of God in his language. And so I kept at it. And then I'd say, I'm going to leave myself notes in different places. And then I'd walk past the notes. That's how bad I was. And then I'd say, okay, I'm going to fix it. I'd say to Rick, this week I'm going to kneel down 10 times. You know, just to say, God, I know you're here. I'd kneel down, and before I knew it, I was thinking about something else. So you can tell a lot had to happen. You know what happened? I started to meditate. I chased down meditation teachers till I found a meditation that works for my soul. It's simple. It's the use of a mantra and sitting still in the presence of God. I cannot fix myself, and I can't fix you. As one of the old-timers said to me, you don't grow your soul. You do the work. You change your thinking. You change the way you act. You change the way you speak. And you give God the material, and God will grow your soul. And that's the way I think it is. And that has taken the claws of my control of you away. Because I can't fix you. I can tell you things. Somebody said to me the other day, do you ever think about, like, where would be the best that you can go to help people? I said, never think about that. I don't think that this is about me helping you. I'm sharing, just like you did, Jane. It's up to me to take what you said and see where it applies to my soul. And if I take nothing and don't apply it, still had a good time listening to you, but it's not going to change me. It's God that changes your soul, but I think for that process, we have to be stripped clean. The bare bones have to be exposed, where I totally know I am not the boss. I'm not in charge. And everybody's got a shot at this. What does page 55 say? It says deep within, every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And you know, that's what helped me, because I started to read that. And I would think, if deep within every man, woman, and child, God is within you. These bodies don't mean anything. They're just atoms and molecules. And one day they're going to the grave, or they're going to the crematorium, or someplace. And that's not what the deal's about. But it's about these souls. And that's why the Hindus have this namaste. The God in me salutes the God in you. That doesn't mean I can't have an opinion. That doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I was just giving a retreat to a bunch of men, and one of them came up to me and he said, isn't that like pouring pink paint? Quite the opposite. I think we're meant to stand tall. We're meant to stand in dignity. When I didn't know that, I had a husband who beat me black and blue, and I didn't know what to do about it. Because I was such a wuss. Don't try beating me today. There will be... I've also learned to be able to speak up. One of the teachers said to me one day, she said, You explode. That's what I used to do. I didn't know how. I was raised in a world where children were meant to be seen and not heard. I had great parents, don't get me wrong, but that was the world. I never learned to speak up, and it always seemed to me when I did speak up, I made a fool of myself, and eventually you just keep it down. Don't say anything, and it churns in here. If you can get a mentor who can help you with that, I had a mentor who taught me to stand up. And then with the information from my life experience, I like myself today. I don't like myself because of how I dress. I don't like myself because of speaking at a podium. I like myself because I know who I am. I think it's totally within our rights to call ourselves a God being. You see, Joel Goldsmith, one of the readers that I follow, he puts it this way. That's another thing. I've learned to meditate, but I do spiritual reading also, because I need more, I get a lot at meetings, but I want to read you, no, I didn't bring that. He talks, for example, about this. I get this. He says, if you look at Lake Erie flows along, and that water we call Lake Erie. Then it comes to a drop, the cliff, and as it goes over, we call it Niagara Falls. It's the same water. It just has a different format. It just flows different. That's all. And maybe for me, it's a good metaphor. God is God. But God shows up in this form called Mildred. God shows up in the forms of all of you. And, it takes me to a different level. See, this is where I think step 3 connects. I'm not neglecting the fact that I'm to talk on step 3. But in step 3 it says, what is the root of the problem? Self. And what is self? You know what I think self is? Self is a belief that the third dimension stuff can make me happy, and it's shoving God into the background. It's totally denying the God. And what does it say in the book? Self is the root of the problem, and it says, I've got to be rid of that. If I'm not, it's going to kill me. God makes that possible. I didn't make that up. It's in the book. And it says, there is no way that we can get rid of self by ourselves. It happens, God gets involved. And I think that is the process. See, I think God is here, God is good, and God doesn't change. And it's up to me to be in harmony with that spirit. And if I'm not, you know what happens? I get PAIN, pain. I get consequences. And I can say it's your fault that I've got unhappy consequences. No, it isn't. I'm out of harmony with that. Some of the damnedest stuff has happened to me lately, because I really am trying to practice that. That's what I think the third step prayer is about. It's about waking up. And if you hear, boys, whoever owns this book has got some heavy-duty work going on. Great stuff. Look at the promises. We had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed. I got caught by the police going 86 on a city street. And he told me he thought that I was quite a stable lady, and I have a good reputation, so he let me go. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. I am not performing his work well when I hate you, when I judge you, when I have got all kinds of negativity going, and I'm not performing His work well when I say, if life were different, I could be okay. Not so. Life is just the way it should be right now in this moment. And if it's not, there's something I should do about it. And Polly will show me how. Imagine this. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. It's all I ever used to think about. Me, me, me. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. And that's what Jane's whole talk, the whole transformation is about, what you're contributing to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of His presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. What a beautiful promise. I can do today different. I don't have to live with all that, but I am also mindful that I can look, and today, if things aren't going well, I can see where has that self crept up. And it's always my claws are out, make me happy, do something for me. And the more I turn to God, that to me is what step 3 is about. Step 2 and step 3 fit. That's why it's not written you have to believe. It says you come to believe. I bet there aren't 2 people in this room who believe the same. And I don't think God's upset about that. We come to believe through the experiences. And that's why step 2 and 3, when you're 10 days sober, are different from, they're the same deal, but you experience them different. You know, as William James said, he said, words can never express certain things. You have to experience. And that's why, one after the other, we talk to each other. Got it. We talk to each other. And there was something else I'm thinking. Yeah. I like also to read. I read a lot of science. And it always amazes me how these great people who have won Nobel Peace Prizes, you know, we've heard so much stuff that religion and science are opposite. I don't think so. The real scientists, what they're talking about is the great power that is everywhere. Even Stephen Hawking has been talking lately about the mind of God. And I want to read you something that Einstein wrote. He said, there's no miracles going to save us. We delude ourselves with the belief that outward acts can be made to take the place of interior changes in thoughts and feelings. Honeys, I don't think even going to lots of meetings, I did go to lots of meetings, I had to do the personal work in here, and sometimes I wanted to sit my hiney on a chair and run away from life. Unless I take what's here and see where can I apply it, what use is it? And he went on to say, we buy ceremonial robes, we repeat by rote, not effective. The only thing that will save us is a radical shift in consciousness. There is only one of us here. We come in different forms, but the God within me is the same as the God in you. And I'll close with the greatest promise I think there is in the big book. It's on page 164. And there he says, see to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great things then will come to pass for you and countless others. That's the great fact. God bless you all.